It is my great pleasure today to welcome my really good friend, Mandla Magagula, to the stage. He's a blockchain, crypto, DLT, DeFi extraordinaire. He's also an incredibly kind human, and I'm hoping that he shows you just how kind he is today with his keynote, which I've seen. It's really good. Mandla, welcome, and all the best for your keynote today.
Good morning. You know something about talking to people, to familiar faces like Joburg, is just like talking to your family, right? It's hard to impress your family. They're sitting there like, we know this guy, What can you tell me, So but it's a great pleasure, to see all of you, number one, and to stand in front of you and share some of my thoughts from during the plague, the last 2 years. We survived the plague. And before I get too far, just want to thank a few people. Firstly, Candice, Robert, thank you so much. Shall we all stand? I want all of us to just stand to our feet and appreciate Candice and Robert for and I want to say this publicly, that we appreciate you for what you do for this community, for putting together this event, especially after so many days of you're on mute. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. So thank you so much. And then secondly, I want you to just give yourselves a round of applause. You made it. You made it. You're here. And to drive my point, it's so hard to impress family. Those two gentlemen I've worked with many years ago, they sat down. They remained seated. All right. Anyway, so you may be seated. Thank you. It's so good. I mean, everywhere I look, I see a familiar face. I see someone I've worked with. I just saw Steven Swart sitting there. I went to school with him. And I worked with him quite a bit. It's just amazing. All right, so just before I get into my talk, I want to just do a few housekeeping things. I'd like to go through my talk from start to finish, and then at the end, then you can ask questions. And I may be the keynote speaker, but I'm very open to feedback. You can come to me personally, especially most of you have my number. And if you don't, you can find me on Twitter or wherever, or, and reach out to me, give me a personalized feedback. And also, please rate the talk and rate it honestly, So don't feel pressured to give me 10, give me 1, but then tell me why, so I can do better next time. All right, now to the talk. Let me see, I just want to check if my clicker is working here. Just give me a second. All right, there you go. All right, the title of my talk is a contentious subject. It's called The Great Myth, Software Engineering Team. Right, and I know many people looking at it like, this is crazy. How could this guy have a title like this at the software engineering conference to a bunch of developers? So basically telling them that they don't matter, they don't exist. No. So I want to build up to where I want to get to, right? So I will try and to build up the topic up to the point where it's painful, and then we'll take it from there. So this man here, am I too far? What's happening? My clicker is not working. All right, so I feel like I need to stand here to be closer. This man here is Professor Michael Drought. He's a professor of English at Wharton College. So he's influenced most of my thinking for the last few years. And he wrote a book a few years, and it's called A Way with Words, Writing, Rhetoric, and the Art of Persuasion. In there's a very good point where he talks about when you're making an argument, he said you must start from a point of agreement. Start from where you agree with whomever you're chatting to, you're talking to, or you're having an argument with. And then from there, you can bring your argument. So that's the approach pretty much that I want to take with this talk. So let's start from a point of agreement. I want us to agree on a few things about what this talk is about. What's the essence of the talk? And sometimes I feel like it's better to start with what the talk is not about. You know, I think it articulates better for a talk like this. So what is this talk not about? This talk is not about gatekeeping. So from this talk, I'm not trying to say the way you're doing things is wrong and you should stop doing it. No. You may just continue. If you feel like it works for you, that's fine. And also, maybe you're seeing the talk for the second time for those people who are in Cape Town, or you're seeing the talk for the first time. And don't feel pressured to agree. You know, I'm not attempting to find universal consensus with this talk. So, as Candice articulated, I'm in blockchain, so we talk about the Genesis block, you know, which is like the first block when you first launch your blockchain network. So software engineering has a Genesis block, right? There was a time when someone came up with software engineering. This thing that we're doing, it's software engineering. So let's analyze that a little bit. So where did it start? This here is Margaret Hamilton, the first human being to coin the term software engineering. Let's look a little bit into Margaret Hamilton. So at the time, she led a team of software developers or software people that were building the guidance and control systems of the in-flight command and lunar modules of the Apollo missions. Basically, the Apollo missions were looking at putting the first man on the moon. A mammoth task. At the time, she was in her late 20s, early 30s. Can you imagine? But this is what's more important about Margaret Hamilton. She coined the term software engineer because she felt that the work she and her team were doing was as much important and as much engineering as the other work on the Apollo spacecraft. Okay, let's look a little bit into this point. Like, what was going on at the time when she came up with this term, a software engineer? This is a young woman. I'm so proud of myself that I didn't say a young girl, a young woman. And at the time, she needed to justify value. You know, she needed to justify the value. She felt the need that I need to justify my value and what my team is doing. You can imagine at the time the engineering bros explaining to her, oh no, this is not engineering what you're doing. You guys, why is it taking so long? You know, I'm kidding. I'm just imagining what could have happened at the time. And then number two is that the fact that there wasn't an elaborate plan, you know, to say, okay, this field of software engineering is going to look like this, and it's going to have, you know, it was like a responsive, very active action at the time. That, okay, I need to call this engineering because I need to show these people that this is as much engineering as what you're doing. So with that, I think the software development narrative is malleable, right? It's not something that we say it's fixed, it's cast in stone, can never change. It's a constantly evolving, which means we can look at it from different lenses. Here's Paul Graham, what he said many, many years ago, 2003, from one of his essays that basically formed the book Hackers and Painters. He said, I've never liked the term computer science. The main reason I don't like it is that there's no such thing. Just imagine, 2003 was many, 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 many years after Margaret Hamilton had come up with the software engineer narrative. And it says computer science is a grab bag of tenuously related area thrown together by an accident of history. So it's not, according to him, it's not a thing. because it's as much as we use it, we use the analogy, we use the narrative, there's no actual field that is computer science, right? We use it to refer to something. So, what are we as software teams and software people? Are we a sports team? Do we train together in your teams? Do we train together and work together and plan the positions in the team that you'll do defense, you'll do attack, and then before start looking for the talent that will fill that position? Is that what we're doing? I don't think we are a sports team necessarily. Are we a family? Right? When you join different companies, welcome to the family. Right? Welcome. Are we a family? Does it not matter what you do within the context of your team? Right? Because in a family, it doesn't matter how I behave and what I deliver. I'm accepted for who I am. I could be the black sheep of the family. It's still fine, you're part of the family. I don't think we're a family either. Are we scientists? Right? Scientists generally use the technique of hypothesis testing. They'll to prove certain truths about the world or disprove certain truths about the world. I don't think we do a lot of hypothesis testing. Maybe sometimes, but we're not generally scientists. But are we engineers? Right? If you look at the engineering or engineers in their purest form, it's someone with a graduate degree. You've got a degree in engineering, and then you spend a few years training, in a real environment, and after that, it's only after you've done a few years of training that they recognize you as a real engineer. You've done practice, and you've shown that you actually are able to be effective in that field. Are we artisans? An artisan is someone who's skilled in a specific trade, right? They use their hands to craft and build certain things, right? And this I struggle a lot with because one thing is a few years ago we started a software development school, like a free software development school, and I was very, very, very adamant that we should call it a software engineering or software craftsmanship academy. I wanted craftsmanship to be part of the description of what this thing was that we're building. But it still doesn't sound right to me that we are necessarily artisans. But why does this matter, what we call ourselves? Why does it matter? The simple answer is that I think words matter. The way we use words and how we use them actually matters. This is Benjamin Lee Wolf. Many years ago, he came up with a study where he concluded that the differences between structures of different languages shape how speakers perceive and conceptualize the world. The way your language is structured determines how you see the world, how you conceptualize the world. I know this, I'm Zulu. There's a word in Zulu that when written down, you need a lot of context. Depending on how I read this word, it could mean yes or no at the same time. Ingatengwa, which means yes, you may buy it. Ingatengwa, it means no, you may not buy it. Right? So words matter. So context and that actually determines how I contribute to your team. The fact that I have that mental model, there's a contribution that I can bring to your team that if you speak English, you don't have these problems, right? So it means the way I do information processing will either help your team or not help your team, but it will help your team somehow. So words matter. So all of these things in software, we're using a lot of analogies for everything. There's nothing that was born And it was like, okay, this is software. We use a lot of these analogies, borrowed analogies. What is an analogy? It's a comparison of two otherwise unlike things based on resemblance of a particular aspect. So that's why you can say software craftsmanship. There's nothing wrong with that, right? You can say you're an engineer. Not necessarily wrong, but it's not entirely on its own the whole thing, the whole truth. In certain contexts, it actually makes sense. Let's look at some of the borrowed analogies that we use in software. String, for instance, right? How did that become this, right? How did this become the thing that we use to represent a number of characters joined together? It's an analogy, it's a borrowed analogy. Scaffold. If you're in construction, you know what a scaffold is. We use a lot of the scaffolding, right? This is a scaffold for those people that don't know how construction works. You know, it's basically used to elevate the constructors as they build, right? And we use this analogy in software. There's a lot of other analogies. The Cape Town talk didn't have one word here. I'm tempted to give people a quiz to find that word. Anyway, but that word is actually deadline. I've had a few chats with my friends afterwards, and we spoke about deadline, the origins of deadline, which is one of the borrowed analogies that we use. In the 1800s, actually a deadline was an actual line that they drew around prisoners' cells. So if you cross that line, you get shot, you die, which brings a whole new meaning to deadline. Right? Are we prisoners? Do we get shot? You know? So these are some of the analogies that we use. Now we're getting into the medicine. What if we looked at software teams through an agricultural lens? So during the plague, or the last 2 years, I know most of you have picked up some hobbies. I picked up a hobby, which is I started building a little garden, right? I have a small little corner. I planted spinach, and it grew, and I was surprised that, wow, my goodness, I don't need to buy spinach anymore. You know, I just want spinach, I go outside. I'm like, okay, let's add tomatoes, right? And it started growing. I'm like, this is interesting. I need a bigger land, you know, to do this. I'm getting good at this. But then, as I was doing this, I looked at how I was building software, how I was interacting with teams, that actually my garden is actually much more effective with all these things together. You know, like co-located spinach and tomatoes and chilies, you know, and they grow just fine. And I start digging a little bit deeper. Sorry, I need to get closer to my clicker. It led me to the works of these two gentlemen, David Holmgren and Bill Mollison. They're Australian. So while Margaret Hamilton was convincing the bros at about software engineering, these guys were actually looking or asking themselves a quintessential question about agriculture and nature. So here's the question. And they said, if most of nature is dominated by perennial plants, trees, and long-leaf plants, why is our agriculture dominated by annual crops? That's a valid question, right? If our country is 80% black and female, why is our teams white males only? Why is it not resembling where we are as a country? Why are we okay with that? If our white males in those teams are earning 40% more than our black females, where's Offazen? Anyway. Right? That's the quintessential question here about teams, about us. Are we using these analogies that we've borrowed for good or for bad? Are we, as a company, able to survive the next 10 years, given how the competitive landscape has changed since COVID? Because trust me, you're not competing against your local guys anymore. You're competing against the guys in London. and they're paying in pounds, right? So your white bros, your small squad is actually getting enticed by companies in London. And what you think is a lot of money for them is cheap. It's cheap labor. They're willing to take them. So here's the question. And it brought me to this thing, the concept of permaculture. Permaculture combines two words here. It's two Latin words, which is permanent and cultura. Permanent means to commit indefinitely. Cultura means for the improvement of humanity. Together, what Bill and David describe it as is this. Permaculture is a conscious design and maintenance of productive ecosystem which have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystem. Think about your team, my initial question. Productive ecosystems, diversity, stability, resilience. It's very good and well to look at diversity as we're doing the good for the community. No, you're not doing the good for the community. You're doing the good for yourself, for your company, for your business, for your existence. And that's permaculture. It's true in agriculture as much as it's true in software. It's getting tense in here. So there's a few principles of permaculture. There's 12 of them, which are very useful. That they're amazing on their own. So I'm not going to go through all of them individually. Some of them will resonate with you, some won't. So I've taken a subset of these principles, and then I'm going to discuss some of them in detail, and then I'll close the talk. So the first principle is this: observe and interact. Permaculture is the principle that you need to constantly observe your environment, observe your team, observe what's going on, the change that you're making, observe and interact, constantly interact with your environment, with your company, with your wider ecosystem. In teams, this says, look beyond where you are with your immediate team. Look at the environment, the surroundings, because change happens. I'm preaching to the converted, because 2 years ago we thought we're happy and there was nothing wrong, and then boom, COVID. You're on mute, right? Brings whole new challenges. Thinking about your internet now, the quality of your internet, your computer, your securities. The second principle, it's about integrate, don't segregate. There's always this thing, because we are engineering teams, and we have Scrum, and we don't want people to talk to us for 2 weeks, right? Until we have a demo, whatever, right? It's a problem. I remember one day sitting next to a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine. The business came and wanted to ask about this thing that we were building. And this guy was like, no, we're in the middle of sprint, right? You can talk to me at sprint review. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. You know, we're saying we're agile, we're prioritizing, or we value human interactions, but we just send this man away. So integrate, don't segregate. So your teams need to have not just a bunch of developers. Oh, this is a practice, right? Get designers in there. Get business in there. Get input. Continuously observe and interact. Integrate, don't segregate. It's another principle. Supply self-regulation and feedback. That's self-explanatory. Don't wait for the government to tell you what should be the percentage of your workforce. Don't wait for HR. Self-regulate. Look at yourself. Look internally. Let's get that feedback. How is my team? What's the health of my team? Do we have groupthink? you know, because groupthink happens. Get a guy that's like, oh yeah, no, he so-and-so said so. Garrett said so, right? We love Garrett. Right? And get feedback continuously. This is true for permaculture as much as it's true for our teams. Obtain a yield. Oh yeah, you guys are getting a better version. I didn't have obtain a yield in Cape Town. So obtain a yield speaks to continuously in your garden, get a benefit, right? Identify the benefit that you're getting. It could be some of that benefit is not monetary, it's not money that you're making. Ultimately, you need to make money. But sometimes it's just a satisfaction that we've moved from there, we're here now. I've had so many conversations after the presentation in Cape Town, people giving me great stories about how they were very intentional about changing the makeup of their teams. And it's beneficial to their team because the people that they've brought in have connected them to new networks. And those networks are coming in because they think their company is the best place to work. Guess what? The London guys have no chance if you have that kind of network. We love you, London. Produce no waste. Most of the current makeup of the way we do software, the way we build teams, is around where is the food coming from? It's coming from the grocery store, right? So basically you get recruiters, they're fighting over the position and they give us positions and then we're hiring. There's no plan. There's no, okay, this is the design of the team. We need to fill this position because this person is going to add this to the team and their diverse experience is going to add, will have this effect. It's basically just saying, let's bring as many people as possible, and then that leads to waste because you get a lot of people not doing what they should be their best at, Use small, slow solutions. It's very easy to listen to a talk like this and feel like, okay, now you need to go and get all the whatever, be as diverse as possible tomorrow, go hire only women and black guys and whatever tomorrow, go to 50%. That's a very, very, very quick way to fail, right? Use small, this in permaculture, use small, slow solutions. Get one guy in, get one woman in, and get your designer as part of the team, get your tester as part of your team. And see what happens. Don't bring 10 testers now that you're all sitting in one place. Because you're increasing your chances of success. Use and value diversity. I think I've spoken about this point. But the benefit of diversity is that the fact that we come from, especially cultural diversity, guys, I'm not addressing your diversity of thought, right? There's diversity of thought. I'm talking about cultural diversity, The benefit of that, they conducted a study a few years ago where it was a murder mystery study where they basically had two teams, like the hypothesis team, which basically people, they got a team and then as they're solving this mystery, they brought in someone from a culturally different background. And they found that just the awkwardness of having a new person that is different to the team actually made that team more productive. just the awkwardness. Without that person adding any material value, it was enough to make the team productive. So it's exactly that cognitive framework that we have from a culturally diverse background actually adds or increases the output of the team. It prevents groupthink. Right? Because you can have all these processes, can have all these nice, but if we're going one path and then the only thinking or the only input that I have is from people that think like me, look like me, say the same things, like watch the same games as me, I'm missing out on a lot. So value diversity. In permaculture, they mentioned that one of the things that increases, the certification, which basically the concept of you have soil that's healthy and then you plant the same crop and then over time, very short period of time, that becomes a desert. But if you have different diverse species, co-located, actually it increases the health, because they feed off of each other. And it makes the ground even much more fertile over a period of time. Design from patterns, not details. I think I'm speaking to the converted here. Right? So it's basically, if you observe, if you design from okay, now I need one specific, like let's say, I'm using this bad example. Black guy, let's get a bunch of black guys, right? You are limiting you're basically a tunnel visioning. You're actually adding to the problem. Rather look at the entire ecosystem, look at the entire company, the makeup of the company, and look at things from that perspective. Look at the shared value, look at where you're existing, the environment within which you exist. And look at the patterns of that environment. And then design your team according to that. Let your team reflect your entire ecosystem within which you exist. So change will always happen, right? So you're gonna get people, your team will change. Your competitive landscape will change, like it has changed right now. You must always and continuously, creatively use and respond to change. Bill Mollison speaks about the whole concept of waste and pollution. He says these two things are bad for any permaculture environment. Work is when whatever the system requires is not included in the system, which requires, then it will need work. An example of this, he speaks about, if you are a chicken farmer, for instance, and then you don't put water, like sustainable water system in that chicken coop, it will require someone else to do that job on a day-to-day basis. Bring a bucket of water and put it in the chicken coop. So what you want is you want to build a self-sustaining water pipeline. And that's the same thing with teams. Respond to change, observe, and then from there, provide whatever the system requires. These are some of the principles, which I think they just tie in nicely with software development teams. So I've given my talk a title, Great Myth, Software Engineering Teams. So the point here is that the narrative of software design and software development and the way we build teams is malleable. It's not cast in stone. The competitive landscape has changed. We need to find better solutions, better ways of thinking about software, the way we build software, the way we build teams. And this diversity thing, the diversity topic, the diversity thinking, it's no longer just a matter of, I'm doing good for the community. Maybe you are doing good. It's actually a survival thing for you. Because when I talk about 80%, I'm talking about millions and millions of talent, of people, that is your talent pool, that you're not potentially using, that you could be using, and add and basically increase your competitive advantage. So what I hope that you take from this is that let's continuously think about where we exist and what change we want to see in the future. It's easy to go to the recruiter and say, okay, now I want 4 women for the next post that I'm hiring. It's easy. It's a grocery store mindset, right? That's where you get food from the grocery store. But and my view is that if you're thinking like that, it's short-sighted. Think about the ground, the soil, the other things. Look beyond just talking to the recruiters like, get me the guy, please. Think about what can you do to the community? How can you uplift? Bring more women, bring more black young men into software development or into information technology. And this right here, if you look at the makeup of the crowd, is testament of what I'm talking about. The majority of the people here is testament of the problem that we have at hand. But it's not from a social responsibility, improve the country perspective. It's survival. Because these guys here will go to New Zealand, to London, and it's not a bad thing. I myself work for a Dubai-based company, right? But I love this country, I love the community, so let's make the change that we want to see in the world for our own survival. Thank you. I think that's the end of my talk. I will open for questions now. Do we have any questions? Yes, there's a question here? Yes. Yeah, here's a mic. Here's a mic.
Testing, testing. Firstly, let me try my best. Ngiyakhonipha mfowethu, and ngiyabonga for an amazing speech. Really, really touched my heart. So
thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
I guess I would like to first ask, do you believe that there's an entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa, at least, that would always want to try and bring us together to a certain extent and make South Africa work?
Yeah.
Cool. How do companies participate in programs like that?
Sir, I didn't get the question.
Oh, sorry. I'm a bit mumbly today.
No worries.
How do companies participate in programs that would help them thrive in this manner?
Okay, great. That's a very good question. How do companies participate in programs that will help to basically increase diversity and things like that? Yeah. There's a lot of these awesome pockets, right? A lot of these boot camps. Like I mentioned, Theo and I have started a school a few years ago. It's called the Coding Ground. There's a lot of these programs, and I think the first thing is you support those young people that are coming out of there. You know, part of the reason for my talk is that we have a lot of young people that have left the Coding Ground to join your teams, right? And which is great. First, that you've opened the door, and number two, when they're inside, some of them are writing reports. There's nothing wrong with writing a report from time to time, but it's nice if they're programming, because that's what they're trained for. If they take part in solutioning, right? It's a lot better. So it's almost like, let's open up your company. Open up your company to new thinking. You know, when someone walks through the door, they don't have to think like you. They see the world, people are diverse. You know, maybe your company values being up at 2 in the morning, and then the person that's coming in is like, okay, I do my work here, and that's fine, right? Let them have the space and time to work within that environment. That's what I think, right? Because that adds a new dynamic now. That okay, right? We have a small window, right? We don't have people that are working the whole day and night, right? We have a small window. Then it's almost like that says something about like the cultural dynamic of your team, you know? That's what I think. And also just give these pockets, these small, or these companies that are dedicated to building up young people, young women. There's Girl Code, there's the Coding Ground, there's Within Code. Hey, give those guys money, okay? Let them build up the next generation. And then after that, get those young people that graduate from there, bring them into your company, let them form part of your engineering teams, right? And let them be who they are within the team. Because here's the thing about diversity. You know, the young people, I had this conversation, sorry, just to expand on this. I had the conversation with someone at the airport, talking about the young guys, the young generation, which is almost like cell phones and PlayStation, and you tell them to go play outside, they take their phone with, you know, and so there's a lot of like, we want results now, and the empathy game is no longer there. You know, so how do you deal with these people that are coming? These are your future people, future employees, potentially. You know, so we need to prepare ourselves for that. Yeah. So yeah, firstly, give those people money that are dedicated to this. Don't try to do it yourself. You know, give them money, give those guys to build, that dedicated to doing that. We'll support you financially so that you can do it. And then from there, you can input in terms of curriculum, the things that you're looking for. Because then after that, you get the right people into your company. Thanks for that question. Brilliant. Another question? There's a question there. Oh, Deepu. Oh, you see, that's the thing. When you present to family, like, hey, Mandla, what are you doing?
Yeah, we got a question from Slack.
Yes.
Dian Jaber. He says it's a really good keynote. And then he would like to know, what should we see as waste pollution within software engineering?
Great. It's a churn rate, right? Churn is waste. You know, your high churn rate is waste. That you hire someone a day and a month later they're gone and you start the process again. That's waste, right? And then also bring someone in and then with a certain skill set and you can't make them do the thing that they were not hired for in the first place. You know, here's the thing. It has been proven, I just forgot the study, that women in companies tend to volunteer for the kind of work that won't advance their careers. They will be the guys that organize the tea, the event, they get together, right? But that doesn't lead to promotion. You'll never get promoted for loving to organize the team building. Although the team building is good for the team, right? So it's exactly that. Churn rate, and yeah, people not doing what they're hired for. Any other question? Okay, we have a question here.
Hi, Mandla.
Hey, Deepu.
Nice seeing you. Good.
Great.
Good talk, by the way. Really proud of you, man.
Thank you.
So,
That's
quick question.
family.
I like your principles on the permaculture.
Yep.
And my question is more around how do you manage the expectations with business when you're trying to create the teams with diversity and like following all those principles and manage that expectations, especially in this high performance, high
It's very good.
reward kind of situation with corporate companies.
That's a
And
brilliant
balancing
question.
it.
That's a brilliant question. Thank you. So Deepu's question is, how do we manage expectations? I think within teams and organizations, you're playing the game of managing expectations anyway, right? It's about explaining the long-term benefits. The long-term benefits, what's the team lurking, and the competitive landscape. You know, immediately you drive the point with numbers and with enough rationale and logic. I found that business is actually, as much as it's a high-performing thing, they're willing to understand. Say, okay, great, we're willing to take on this risk. Because anyway, what is business? It's a risk versus reward. You just depends on the scale at which you want to take that risk. Okay, we had one question there, and then I think that's it, right?
There we go. I'll do one from Slack again, and then.
Okay.
I'm sure you can answer this one quickly.
Yeah.
This is from Kirsten Merchant.
Yeah.
In permaculture, you need to commit indefinitely, but within monocultures are still the majority. How do you suggest starting to clear the ground to plant more diversity? How do you begin to break the status quo?
Great. That's a very good question. I don't know if this is based on permaculture. I'll answer from a software team's perspective. So number one is, be open. Include diversity as part of your strategic intent as a company. Let it be part of your strategy. Not from, oh, we want to make the country better. Well, that's basically the benefit for your survival, right? For yourself, because your pool is smaller if you're not diverse enough. So include that as part of your strategy, and don't try to do it yourself. You know, it's very, very hard to do this, to run a program where you're teaching young people and at the same time have to deliver. Rather focus on people that are doing this full time. Empower those people. You know, you will not believe how disempowered these organizations are in terms of financial input, in terms of just input from business, in terms of skill set. You know, support universities, support these small boot camps, and that's how you basically start. And then from there, open your doors. Let these young people come in and work within your teams and add value there. I think that's the starting point. And then from there, we'll observe and interact. Right? Let's start there, and then we'll observe and interact and take it forward. All right, we had a question, yes.
Hello? Oh, cool.
Hi, yes.
Hi. Yeah, I really love the example about the coding schools, the boot camps out there, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you said it out loud. Like I see the same problem in many companies where they end up in roles that aren't necessarily the primary engineering teams. It's probably something that keeps me up at night the most. And we really, in my company, it's something we really want to do and tap into that talent pool. But we really struggle comparing to your more traditional career paths, computer science, university degrees, to put them, to find a nice system where all that works together. I mean, in your experience, do you have a nice practical example where you've seen other firms, get that right, integrate people?
Yeah. There's something I actually didn't mention here. I was claiming that you got a deluxe version, but you did not. So I used to work with Candice many years ago. So Candice is very passionate about teaching people that when people join a company, to making sure that they get productive as quickly as possible. So she was very meticulous and very organized when grads, because the company we worked for used to take graduates in. And then she would plan their daily activities, that what do you do today, tomorrow? What problem are you trying to solve today? What's your typing speed, etc. And then basically that became the culture of the entire team. And then from there, over time, these guys that I'm talking about are now senior developers where they work. In fact, I think some of them are still at the place where we used to work. So what I have done, because we started the coding grounds, I took some of that learnings and then basically codified, put them in a GitHub repository that is open. I'm going to share on my socials. Then you can just look. You can take and throw away whatever you want, right? But it basically paints a picture on what a young graduate or young engineer needs to do on a daily basis. Because it's not just programming. How fast can you type, right? Can you tell a story clearly, etc., etc. So those things are articulated there. Then some of the problems that you can give to young people joining your team. That's it. I feel like that was a very long. We're still fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any more questions?
No.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
We're
Everybody
done.
give Mandla a round of applause for that amazing keynote.